The billionaire sat in the back of his sleek black limousine, glancing out the window at the busy city streets. He had it all: wealth, power, a life of luxury. But lately, something didn't feel right. He had grown used to his private cars, the fancy meetings, and the constant flow of money, but today, he needed a break from it all. His driver asked if he was ready to go, and without a second thought, he gave a simple nod. The billionaire had made a decision. Today, he would take a taxi. It was an odd choice, but something inside him urged for a change of pace. He had heard about a new taxi service that offered rides across the city, and he thought it would be a good way to experience the streets again, like he used to, before all the wealth and business took over his life. As the limo rolled to a stop, he stepped out and looked around. The street was busy, full of yellow taxis zooming by. He picked one, raised his hand, and within moments, the driver stopped. The taxi was modest, nothing fancy. The windows were a little cracked, and the faded yellow paint told a story of years of use. But there was something real about it. The billionaire wasn't sure why, but it felt good to step into this world again, away from the distractions, the deals, and the numbers that usually filled his mind. "Where to, sir?" The taxi driver's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. It was warm, tired, but polite. He took a deep breath and gave the address of a nearby restaurant. It was a simple ride, but it was the start of something that would change both their lives forever. The taxi driver's name was Ahmed. He was a man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a face that showed years of hard work. His clothes were worn, but they were clean. Everything about him was modest, from the frayed edges of his jacket to the scuffed shoes that had seen better days. He had been driving a taxi for over 30 years, ever since he first moved to the city. Back then, life was simpler. He had big dreams, but over time, reality set in. The money never came easy, and the long hours behind the wheel made him feel like he had aged a lot faster than most people. He didn't mind, though. It was his job, and he took pride in doing it well. Ahmed wasn't used to high-end passengers, not like the one sitting in the back of his cab now. The billionaire had the kind of presence that made everything else in the world fade into the background. He had seen men like him before, people who moved quickly, made decisions without much thought, and lived their lives surrounded by wealth. But Ahmed wasn't fazed by the billionaire's aura. He had learned long ago that everyone, no matter their status, had their own struggles. His own life hadn't been easy, but he had learned to stay humble. As the billionaire settled into the back seat, Ahmed gave him a polite smile, then turned his attention back to the road. "Where are you from?" the billionaire asked, trying to start a conversation. Ahmed smiled softly. "I'm from a small village far from here, but life brought me to the city, and I've been driving this taxi for as long as I can remember." The billionaire nodded, not knowing where the conversation would go, but feeling something about this driver was different. Maybe it was the quiet strength in his eyes, or the way he spoke, calm and steady, as if he had seen it all. Whatever it was, it intrigued him. The city's hustle and bustle filled the air as the taxi navigated through the busy streets. The billionaire looked out the window, watching the world pass by, his mind wandering. He didn't always have time to appreciate the little things, like the sound of traffic, or the feeling of being part of the everyday world. His life was so often behind glass walls, protected by his wealth and status. "How long have you been driving a taxi?" he asked, breaking the silence. It was a simple question, but there was something in the way he asked it, almost like he was trying to connect in a way he hadn't with anyone in a long time. Ahmed glanced at him through the rearview mirror, the wrinkles on his face deepening as he smiled. "Over 30 years now. I came to the city hoping for a better life. But life, it doesn't always turn out the way you expect." The billionaire could hear the heaviness in Ahmed's voice, a quiet weariness that spoke of years of hard work and disappointment. But there was also a certain peace in his words, as if he had long ago accepted the life he had built for himself. "Do you have family?" the billionaire asked, now more curious. Ahmed's eyes flickered for a moment. "I have a daughter," he said, his voice softening. "She's the reason I keep going. She's smart, a very bright girl. I just want to make sure she has every opportunity in the world." The billionaire raised an eyebrow. "A daughter? How old is she?" "She's 16 now. Ahmed replied, his tone filled with pride. She's been at the top of her class every year. I'm doing everything I can to help her get a good education, so she can have a better future. The billionaire listened carefully, sensing that there was more to the story. Ahmed's eyes, though tired, lit up when he talked about his daughter. It was clear that she meant everything to him. I'm sure she'll make you proud, the billionaire said, half smiling as he thought about his own life. His own children, though they lived in luxury, never seemed to have the same drive or passion. As the taxi continued down the street, the city's sounds faded into the background, and the billionaire found himself thinking more and more about this driver. Ahmed wasn't just another face in the crowd. There was a depth to him, something the billionaire hadn't expected to find during such a simple ride. As the taxi turned onto a quieter street, the billionaire couldn't help but notice the state of the car. The seats were worn, and the dashboard had visible cracks. The air freshener hung weakly from the rearview mirror, its scent almost gone. It was nothing like the pristine luxury cars he was used to, but there was something about this taxi that made him feel oddly grounded. The billionaire shifted in his seat, glancing at the worn upholstery. "How long have you had this taxi?" he asked, almost casually. "About 10 years now," Ahmed replied with a shrug. "It's old, but it still gets me where I need to go." The billionaire nodded, taking a closer look at the taxi's faded exterior. There was no denying it was in rough shape, but there was something dignified about it. This was the vehicle that had been his constant companion for over a decade. It had served him faithfully, no matter how tough things had gotten. Without thinking, the billionaire reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wad of bills. He looked at the money for a moment, feeling the weight of it in his hands. He knew it was more than enough to cover the ride, but something urged him to do more. "Here," he said, handing Ahmed an envelope with a generous amount of cash inside. "Take it. You deserve it." Ahmed took a quick glance at the money, his hand pausing mid-air. It was a lot. Too much. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. "No, sir," Ahmed said gently, his voice a mix of gratitude and modesty. "That's too much. I don't need it." The billionaire was surprised by the refusal. It wasn't often people turned down money from him, especially not that much. He studied Ahmed for a moment. "I insist," the billionaire said, trying to push the envelope into the driver's hand. "You've been working hard. You deserve more than this." But Ahmed only shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I appreciate it, sir, truly. But money isn't my biggest concern. I have enough to get by, and that's all that matters. What's important to me is my daughter's future, making sure she has a chance to do what she loves." The billionaire blinked, taken aback by the driver's words. Most people, especially those who struggled, would have accepted the money without a second thought. But not Ahmed. He wasn't looking for handouts. He was looking for something more meaningful. The billionaire sat back, feeling both humbled and intrigued. There was something about this man, something different, that made him want to understand his story more. As the taxi made its way through the streets, the conversation shifted. The billionaire, feeling more relaxed now, leaned back in his seat, glancing at Ahmed through the rearview mirror. There was something about him, something deeper that the billionaire wanted to know. He could feel it. Ahmed wasn't just any ordinary taxi driver. "I've never met someone quite like you," the billionaire said, his voice thoughtful. "Most people would have taken the money without a second thought." Ahmed glanced at him for a brief moment before focusing back on the road. He didn't seem uncomfortable, but there was a noticeable change in his demeanor, a quiet seriousness that wasn't there before. "It's not about money," Ahmed replied, his voice steady. "I'm not one to chase after it. It's about family. And the future I want to give my daughter." The billionaire's interest deepened. "You keep talking about your daughter. What's so special about her?" A soft smile crossed Ahmed's face, but there was also a touch of sadness in his eyes. "She's special, all right. A smart girl. She's always been at the top of her class, always pushing herself to be better. I'm doing everything I can to help her reach her dreams. The thing is, life, it hasn't been easy." The billionaire leaned forward, sensing that there was more to the story than just ambition. "What do you mean? What's been so tough?" Ahmed's grip on the steering wheel tightened for a moment, and he let out a small sigh. "My wife passed away years ago. She was everything to me. We were a team, and now it's just me and my daughter. I've been working every day, driving this taxi, saving every penny, just so she can have a chance at something better. I don't want her to live the way I have. I want her to have a future, a real chance at a good life." The billionaire was silent for a moment, his mind racing. There was something in Ahmed's voice, in the way he spoke about his daughter, that struck him deeply. The man wasn't just trying to survive. He was doing everything for someone else, for his child. "How old is she?" the billionaire asked, his voice quieter now. "She's 16, Ahmed replied, his voice soft but full of pride. "She's been working hard at school, trying to get into a good college. I'm doing everything I can to help her get there. I don't have much to offer her, but I'll do anything to see her succeed." The billionaire was moved by the depth of Ahmed's love for his daughter. He had heard stories of parents sacrificing everything for their children, but something about the way Ahmed spoke made it feel even more real. The driver wasn't asking for anything in return. He just wanted his daughter to have the life she deserved. As the taxi continued down the road, the billionaire began to feel something unexpected. A sense of connection. He had always been surrounded by wealth, but here was a man who lived with far less, yet had something far more valuable. Love, dedication, and hope for the future. The silence in the taxi grew heavier, and the billionaire found himself lost in thought. He had met many successful people, but none of them had the kind of passion and selflessness that Ahmed had. The more he heard about Ahmed's daughter, the more he felt an overwhelming desire to help, to do something to make a difference. "You know," the billionaire began, his voice gentle, "I could help. I could set up a scholarship for your daughter. She deserves the best education. I can make sure she's set for college, no matter the cost." Ahmed's eyes flickered up to the rearview mirror. His expression unreadable for a moment. He didn't speak right away. The offer had come out of nowhere, and the billionaire could see that it caught him off guard. "No, sir," Ahmed said softly, his voice hesitant. "I appreciate the thought, truly, but it's not necessary. My daughter, she doesn't need a handout. I'm doing everything I can to make sure she gets into a good school. It's the least I can do for her." The billionaire frowned. He couldn't understand why Ahmed would turn down such an offer. This was the kind of opportunity that most people would jump at. And yet, Ahmed wasn't interested in charity. The more the billionaire thought about it, the more intrigued he became. There was something else going on here, something deeper than just pride or stubbornness. After a long pause, Ahmed let out a deep sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly, as if he had been carrying a weight for far too long. "The thing is, I've been keeping a secret," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The billionaire sat up straighter, now completely focused on him. "A secret?" Ahmed nodded, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "It's not what you think. I've been working hard for years to save for my daughter's future. But I don't need the scholarship, because she already has her tuition covered." The billionaire's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" "How?" Ahmed paused again, as if he was weighing his next words carefully. "My wife, before she passed away, she made sure our daughter would never have to worry about money for her education. She opened a savings account years ago, one that I didn't even know existed. And now, everything is taken care of, all of it. The tuition, the fees, the books, everything." The billionaire was stunned. He had expected a different kind of answer. He thought Ahmed might be struggling to put together the pieces for his daughter's future. Instead, he was hearing about a woman who had planned for the future, even after she was gone. It wasn't just the money that hit him, it was the thoughtfulness, the love, and the foresight of a mother who had made sure her child would be taken care of, no matter what. "I had no idea," the billionaire said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. "Your wife? She was incredible." Ahmed's face softened, a mixture of sadness and pride in his eyes. "She was. I miss her every day. But knowing that she thought ahead like that, it gives me peace. My daughter's future is already secure. I just have to make sure I'm here to see it through." The billionaire felt a lump form in his throat. It was a rare feeling. He wasn't used to being speechless, but something about this moment left him shaken. Ahmed wasn't just a taxi driver. He was a man who had carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but had done so with a quiet strength and love for his family that the billionaire could barely comprehend. The billionaire sat back in his seat, his mind reeling from Ahmed's words. He had never expected this kind of revelation. He had offered money, thinking it was the right way to help, but Ahmed had no need for that. What he needed was the peace of mind that his daughter's future was already secure. He needed to feel like he had done right by her, and it seemed he had done exactly that. The billionaire felt a strange sensation rise up in him, a deep sense of respect. For years, he had been surrounded by people who constantly sought more, always looking for ways to build their fortunes, expand their businesses, and increase their power. But here was a man who, despite his struggles, didn't ask for more. He just wanted to ensure his daughter had a better life than he had. I didn't know, the billionaire said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I was offering help, but in truth, you've already done the most important thing a parent can do. Ahmed didn't respond at first. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel, but he didn't look back at the billionaire. It was clear that talking about his wife and their plans for their daughter was not easy for him, but there was a quiet pride in his words. He had kept the secret for so long, unsure of how to tell anyone about the sacrifices his wife had made for their daughter's future. But now, sharing it felt freeing. Thank you, the billionaire added, his voice softer now, for sharing that with me. It's a beautiful thing, the way you've both cared for her, even after everything. Ahmed smiled, his eyes brightening for a moment. I only did what any father would do for his child. The billionaire shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. It's more than that, Ahmed. It's far more than that. A lump formed in his throat as he thought about his own children, who had everything money could buy, but lacked the kind of purpose and love that seemed to shine through in Ahmed's life. He had spent so much of his time focusing on accumulating wealth and building his empire, and yet here was a man with far less, but who understood something far more important, what it meant to truly care for someone, to work hard for their future, and to love them with everything you had. As the taxi continued on its journey, the billionaire couldn't help but reflect on how much he had taken for granted. Money had always been his solution to every problem, but now he was seeing that not everything could be solved with wealth. In fact, some of the most meaningful things in life, like love, sacrifice, and family, had nothing to do with money at all. The taxi rolled through the final few blocks, the streets quieter now. As they neared their destination, the billionaire looked out the window, his mind still racing from the conversation. He hadn't expected the ride to take such an emotional turn. What had started as a simple taxi ride had turned into something far more profound, something that left him thinking about his own life in a way he hadn't in years. As they approached the restaurant, the billionaire realized the ride was almost over. For the first time, he wasn't in a hurry to get out. He didn't want the moment to end, didn't want to leave the quiet strength that Ahmed had shared with him. The driver's humility and love for his daughter had touched him in ways that he wasn't sure he could explain. They pulled up to the curb, and the taxi came to a stop. The billionaire looked at Ahmed, who was still focused on the road, his expression unchanged. But the billionaire could see the subtle shift in his eyes. Something had passed between them, something that hadn't been there when they first started their journey. The billionaire reached for the door, but before he stepped out, he paused. He wanted to say something more, to acknowledge the kindness Ahmed had shown him, even if it wasn't in the way he had initially expected. Ahmed, he started, his voice almost hesitant. I just want you to know that I won't forget this. What you've shared with me today, it's changed me. Ahmed turned slightly, his face softening into a small, almost knowing smile. You don't need to thank me, sir. I just do what I can for my daughter. I don't expect anything in return. The billionaire felt a pang in his chest, something like guilt mixed with admiration. He had been so focused on his wealth, on all the things he could buy, that he had never truly understood the depth of what people like Ahmed had to offer. It wasn't about the money, the success, or the luxuries. It was about love, family, and the simple, quiet moments that gave life meaning. He opened the door and stepped out of the taxi, but before he could walk away, he turned back to Ahmed. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you needed money. I know that's not what matters to you. But if there's ever anything I can do for you, anything at all, just let me know." Ahmed nodded, his voice steady and calm. "Thank you, sir. But for now, I'm just happy to be doing what I do. Taking care of my daughter, that's all I need." The billionaire watched as the taxi drove off, disappearing into the city's quiet streets. He stood there for a moment, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. Something had shifted in him today, something he wasn't sure he could fully understand yet. As he entered the restaurant, he felt a new sense of gratitude, a quiet reminder that not everything could be bought or fixed with wealth. Some things, the most important things, were earned with love, sacrifice, and devotion. The billionaire sat at his table in the restaurant, the menu in front of him, but his mind wasn't focused on food. He couldn't stop thinking about Ahmed, the taxi driver who had opened up about his struggles, his love for his daughter, and the sacrifices he had made. As he stared out the window, the bustling city outside seemed so different now. It was still the same world he had always known, filled with ambition and wealth, but today, he saw it through a different lens. He realized how much he had taken for granted. It wasn't the money, the cars, or the fancy meetings that made life meaningful. It was moments like the one he had just shared with Ahmed, those quiet, unsung moments of selflessness and love. The billionaire thought about his own children, living in their perfect, luxury world, and wondered if they would ever understand the value of what truly mattered. Would they ever know the kind of dedication Ahmed had shown for his daughter? He let out a soft sigh, feeling a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. The things he had been chasing for so long, more wealth, more success, suddenly seemed so insignificant. For the first time in years, he thought about what it would be like to live a life not defined by the things he could buy, but by the love he gave and received. The quiet strength of a man like Ahmed, who had so little but gave everything, had shown him something he hadn't realized he was missing. The billionaire knew that his life would never be the same after today. He couldn't undo the choices he had made, but he could change how he looked at the world, how he valued the people in it. The future wasn't about more wealth, it was about finding deeper meaning, making real connections, and understanding that love and sacrifice were worth far more than anything money could buy. And so, as he sat there, the sounds of the city faded into the background. He felt different, changed in a way that was hard to put into words. But one thing was clear: life was about more than just success. It was about how you loved, how you cared, and how you gave to others, even when it seemed like you had nothing left to give.